You looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Skeleton keys, golden tickets, forged packs, DC Sync, DC Shadow. The Active Directory attack surface is expanding faster than admins can keep up with. Securing your environment begins with implementing least privilege administrative models, but does not end there. Many organizations send Active Directory syslog events to a SIM platform. However, logs are noisy, of limited scope, and are time-consuming to review and act upon. Active Directory is secure when it's clean, understood, configured properly, monitored closely, and controlled tightly. StealthBits technology provide solutions that monitor, secure, and detect the latest threats against Active Directory. Visit them today at stealthbits.com to learn more. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Gabriel is still here with us in studio. John is still on the lines via Skype to cover the enterprise security news. Our first story is Duo integrating with Sophos to address the BYOD security problem, which I think is interesting. We haven't covered a BYOD security problem in a while. John, what's your take on?
No, it's been pretty much nothing but container, container security, and well, it's been this. I don't know who stands to gain the most from this relationship. Is it Duo or is it Sophos?
That's a really good question. I mean, Duo's a pretty big, growing company now, though.
Sophos is no slouch either,
and Sophos has been around probably longer, definitely longer. So. Yeah, I mean, the best integrations are mutually beneficial.
That's the right answer.
I mean, working in your role, right? You're probably talking to a lot of people about potential integrations. Yeah. So, I think it's interesting. I don't know, like, the problem where we stand as an industry today with BYOD. Again, we don't really talk about it much because we just kind of assume today that people are going to use their own devices, and I really think rather than control the device, you control, the data and monitor it, which of course fits with StealthBits messaging, but
you're not gonna
coincidentally enough, right? But I really think that's where it's at today.
Well, so if you guys were going to sit down and you're a CSO and you're going to invest in something like BYOD security, or you're going to invest in a CASB to try to bring some type of control over your cloud authentication, where your data is, things like that, where are you guys going to focus?
Yeah, definitely the CASB, for sure.
See, the thing about the CASB is it has to be data focused, right? By nature, it has to be, because controlling, you have to ask the question, what am I controlling access to? So that kind of has to happen, and I feel like I'm going to agree with you guys that that's probably where I start, because if I just go purely BYOD, I'm controlling the device, but I'm still kind of blind as to what data that device may or may not be getting access to. So
it's interesting. Wendy Nather came on Paul Security Weekly a while back. She works for Duo, and they were talking about a model, and there are other vendors talking about this model. Google was one of the ones that developed this model. It basically said, look, it doesn't matter what devices people use. We're going to evaluate the device you're using. If we deem it not appropriate, a level to access the data that you're accessing, and there are different levels, right? Then we may say you need to do X, Y, Z, or you can't use this device to access this particular data. I think that's where the industry is going today.
So that answers is this device safe enough, secure enough to access that data? But are we asking and answering the question, should the individual at the other end of that device even be accessing that data? You know?
Yes, you have to separate the individual from the device, for sure.
But I think no matter what, you come back to, you can't get through talking how to secure that without actually focusing on the data itself first.
All roads lead to it. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we were just talking about Active Directory. We have organizations that have not solved this problem in Active Directory. It's just something that's compounded. And I think that whenever you're adding in Box.com, Dropbox, you're adding in Google Drive, all these different cloud-based providers, we're now exponentially increasing that problem set. And like our next webcast that I'm doing for Attack Tactics, I'm talking about attacking organizations that have no Active Directory. How do you effectively get access to their data? And this is something that 99.999% of organizations haven't even began to start thinking about at all.
I totally have to tune into that one. That should be interesting.
So I find it interesting that McAfee, they're claiming they've got $2.6 billion in annual revenue. Their evaluation when they were spun off to TPG Capital is $4.2 billion. They're talking about acquiring companies. This is where we get to have fun and talk about, well, who's McAfee going to acquire? We're actually talking about this on Business Security Weekly. You've got a well-established endpoint company. Are they going to go buy one of the newer players in endpoint security? Which ones have gone too far, where their valuation's too high, where McAfee just can't afford them? I mean, if their annual revenue is $2.4 billion, right?
Yeah, we were talking yesterday about Cylance and not Cylance, but Cylance and CrowdStrike.
Yeah. So that EDR, EPP space has been crowded for a while, right? I mean, in the last 2 years, we've seen roughly 30 plus vendors. It's a lot of vendors in that space. And we've always kind of predicted that there's going to be a lot of consolidation in that area. But you just nailed it, too. There's been so much capital investment in the EDR EPP space. A lot of those guys are getting a little pricey to take advantage of. So, I mean, but if anyone can do it, it's McAfee, though, right? I mean, they certainly have the capital, but does it make sense? Does it make sense?
At $1 billion valuation, right, they're probably not going to pick up an endpoint company. No. But if you're a couple $100 million valuation,
sure,
I think you're
sub
probably
50,
in the scope.
maybe you can.
I always wonder how they would integrate the two products, right? Like, let's say McAfee really likes the company. They got great technology. They're making some sales. They're a good acquisition target, right? How do they integrate that? Like, the technologies are so disparate at this point.
In some situations, yes, but also if you're looking at Symantec and McAfee, they're actually coming up. I would say they're in the ballpark of about 85% of what you would get with like a Cylance or a CrowdStrike at this point. Gotcha. And a lot of my customers, whenever we're talking to them about how they should be looking at this space, at the endpoint security space, whether it's artificial intelligence or EDR or whatever they're doing, I'm really recommending all of them just to sit tight. If they're running McAfee, Symantec, or Microsoft even, because advanced threat protection is coming up. I mean, Microsoft is no joke in this space either. It's very hard for me to recommend someone to go with a new up-and-coming company whenever the big behemoth company that's already integrated in their environment of 150,000 nodes is starting to implement 85% of what that up-and-coming whippersnapper company does. It just doesn't make any sense to just rip these huge installations out and replace them, not with just one product, but in many situations, 2 or 3 products to make up what this one product did or had the capabilities of doing.
And to answer your other question, I mean, I look at this, I'm in the product strategy, side of the business, if you would. I don't acquire them based on what they're doing right now. I acquire them based on vision, right? What's your vision for this, for your customers, for your solution, for your business, 3, 5 years, et cetera, out? I want to see that visionary roadmap and how you plan on executing on it. That's what you invest in. I mean, if all you're investing is what they have today, I mean, again, that space is so crowded. I think you have already bought something that is likely to get its butt whooped in the market in 12 months, 24 months, if that's what you're buying based on. So you got to look at the vision and the strategy of what.
Well, and also, what's the uniqueness? I mean, do they have any patents? Is there something that makes this company completely unique that no other company can actually implement or actually make it worth the amount of money that you're going to invest in it? That's a huge question to ask because a lot of them are doing the exact same thing with just slightly different tweaks on the same theme.
Ultra.
CyberArk had some news. They've got some offering updates to their product solutions. CyberArk Privileged Cloud. They're making a cloud play here, and I still think they're a very strong player. If we're talking about Active Directory security, I'm sure you likely have some kind of integration with privilege access management systems.
We've got a strong integration with them, in fact. No, we go out and find the privileged accounts and hand them off to CyberArk.
Right.
We love what those guys are doing.
Well.
That's right. Absolutely.
I really think that's really all I had there. I don't think there's anything more. Ping Identity acquires Elastic Beam for AI-powered API security.
Wow. Oh, God.
It's making your head hurt, John?
Someone's going to have to explain that.
I'm becoming more and more like Jack every single week. Okay, so the whole idea of artificial intelligence for API security, it actually does make sense, but it sounds a lot sexier than it actually is. One of the cool things about APIs, they tend to be a lot more well-defined as far as what's possible. Like if you're working with a web app, then there's all this weird unknown of what the browser can actually do, how JavaScript actually functions, and these frameworks that we've been working on in the browser are very, very complicated and have all kinds of awesomeness to them that makes for a great attack surface. With an API, it's a lot more clearly defined, and it should be able to be something that you can detect attacks against it. But I'm not seeing, even though we're pen testing mobile apps all the time, and we're testing APIs and there's vulnerabilities, I'm not seeing a lot of big news-making security vulnerabilities in these APIs, as many as I think we should be seeing. So I think that this is good. I just hate anytime anyone's just dropping in artificial intelligence, because honestly, with Elastic Beam, it just feels like they're just dropping in artificial intelligence just so it sounds cool.
Well, and yeah, we were talking about web app security. Oddly enough, on Application Security Weekly, I think it was Dan Kuykendall was saying, like, look, we've got our web app scanner, and he's like, I want to get information from anywhere I can. He's like, if the API is documented, he's like, we pull that in, and we use that as part of our testing. Now, is that artificial intelligence? Dan, to my knowledge, didn't use that term, but he's like, yes, it's a data point that I'm pulling in. And I think that's what John is saying. Like, this sounds really sexy, but it's really like just another data point they're using to identify more accurately, vulnerabilities in APIs.
Well, not just the vulnerabilities, but the API, you can watch the traffic. It's going to be consistent. And all of a sudden, if you start seeing deviations in that API traffic, alert, stop, block. And the reason, sorry, I forgot something. The reason why this is key is whenever you purchase an API stack for a mobile application, you may only be using like 10, 15 function calls, but it may support like 75, 80 different function calls. And I think that having something that's watching that and saying we just went from 7 to now we're basically enumerating all of the different API endpoints, that's weird. We need to be able to alert and stop that. That's cool. But yeah, once again, artificial intelligence getting thrown around far more than it should.
Yeah.
It's interesting when we think about secure by default. I think of when I first started with Linux, right? It was like Red Hat 5.2 or something. And you'd take that and you'd install it and you're messing around with it. And then you put it on the internet and you're like, wow, like I got hacked really fast. That was kind of cool.
Your first mistake was not using BSD.
That's where I went after that, right? I did have a BSD like little server farm a couple of years later, primarily for that reason, right? But we've come such a long way, and the author of this article points out that, like, what is this is Tom Tomasin, where do we stand with secure by default today? Like, I don't believe you take anything in its default configuration without applying your own defaults today. Like, things have just evolved.
If it's not secure by design, it won't be secure by default.
Right.
Like, if there was no consideration in the architectural phase of whatever technology it was that was being built, if there was nothing in the design portion of it, it cannot inherently be secure by default.
Yeah, design and culture too. Like, I think of TapLock. I don't know if you've read the news about TapLock. That's, I think, a good example of what you're talking about, Gabriel. There was very little thought put into actual security of that lock. There was definitely, in my opinion, a lack of security culture in that organization. That in the tricky part is for them, they advertised this lock that was unbreakable and supposed to be secure, but didn't, obviously, because of the 3 different vulnerabilities we talked about, last week's shows. They're there, and their response is kind of lackluster too.
Biggest security taboo.
Yeah.
You can't break this.
Yeah. Don't make the Oracle mistake.
Hold my beer.
Well, and I'm going to give everyone an acid test. If you have a product and they say that it's secure by default, it's such an easy test. If a vendor comes in and says our product's secured by default, ask them, does it work when I install it? If they say yes, it's not secure by default.
There you go.
It's like if you're using bind, like if you just turn on bind, it's not going to work. You have to go in and actually make some configuration changes to make sure that it's going to function properly right off the start, or that damn thing's just not going to fire up and run. And that's secure by default. It should not function at all as its base state.
Right.
Painful flashbacks the first time I installed SE Linux. It's like, but now nothing works.
It's secure by default. I mean, it doesn't work.
Club.
I'm pretty sure it's secure, though.
Survive. Oh, God.
Nothing works. Yeah, that'll do it.
Our last story here is security orchestration and automation. And it's Demisto's announcement that they're supporting AWS, which now they're claiming is the first SOAR platform to integrate with AWS, which is kind of surprising to me.
It's also keyless zero trust model allows for execution sans long-term credentials too. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, I think there are some that are really doing the zero trust thing, and what they do is probably most closely related to zero trust. And then I think there's a lot of people that are using it as a marketing term to garner some attention. But
so how does that play with the fact that Microsoft purchased Phantom not too long ago? Because
was it Microsoft that purchased Phantom?
It was.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I said, Microsoft is
Microsoft's kicking ass,
coming up.
Dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to hold back as my love for Microsoft right now, but let me tell you, in the past year or so, like I've come around full circle. I'm like, they're just on a lot of different fronts. Security being one of them.
Yeah.
We had a great interview with Galen Hunt last week. He was doing Microsoft Azure Sphere, which is an entire platform, hardware, software, and cloud that will allow for secure IoT devices. And I was like, hold on, like I've heard this before. I've been doing embedded device security IoT, research for a really long time. And then I looked at it, and then I reached out to Microsoft, which, by the way, that was another reason why I love Microsoft. Great to work with, right?
Yeah.
And I got on the phone with Galen, and I was like, wow, okay, I get it. Like, that's awesome. Like, that is all the models I've seen to address that issue, that can solve it. Now, we go back to this story, right? Microsoft's Azure is getting a lot of great reviews, right? And it's not just even all about Microsoft, right? They're 48% Linux. In fact, their embedded operating or kernel on their IoT architecture is Linux.
Right.
And then they picked up Phantom, which lets them basically do what Demisto's now playing catch up, right?
Yeah.
So
kind of my question. So that should be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think it's a critical component though to any kind of orchestration platform. It's got to play in the cloud, right? In some capacity.
It's mandatory. We were talking about this with Michael earlier, but one of the things that even we've done too is integrated the concept of playbooks into our responses, because you have to be able to, again, that maturity model, right, of not doing things, getting all the way up to measured and controlled. You have to be able to start automating some of that. And I personally feel as though the security orchestration and automation as a response to incidents is the natural progression of smarter alert generation, right? So we're going to see more of this. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that for sure, especially as we keep developing out in that space.
Now, I like this for, one reason I like this is because if you've looked into Amazon's AWS technology, very easily and very quickly you're overwhelmed. Like, you're like, well, automation is possible natively in the platform, but like there's a lot there. There's a lot there to uncover. Now, to have a solution that's going to help you guide that and implement it in your environment, I think is a much needed thing. I think Azure is probably the same thing. I haven't looked into it as much. They're building in so much capabilities. I think it's a natural progression that these tools are going to help you automate and manage. And we've seen that for years now. I mean, when I worked in vulnerability management, like all of a sudden there was this explosion of features to help you get a handle on your cloud.
To be fair, there are some shortcomings. What I've seen in there too is not a complete silver bullet. I think one of the areas where they've got some soft spots, if you would, is just with regards to how far back in the data sets you can actually go. I don't know if that's intentional or not, or what their plans are. I don't have a lot of insight into their kind of medium and longer term strategies, but what they have going on there right now is pretty good, but Microsoft has traditionally always left the door open to build out that ecosystem of solutions by third-party vendors. So, I mean, we may see this, Demisto, and even, again, folks like ourselves be able to address some of those. It's hard to call them shortcomings because, that is part of Microsoft's overall strategy is to keep that very healthy ecosystem of partners that can give their customers what they need, because not all their customers need the same things. So,
right. Yeah, and that was definitely the message from Galen as well. Galen's like, hey, you can use our Azure cloud, or you can integrate with other cloud as well. He's like, obviously we want you to use, but like you said, different problems, different organizations. So
they're really good at that.
Awesome. Well, John and Gabriel, thank you so much for appearing on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.